What's going on, Serpa Squad? Tanner here. Disregard this mess I got going on in the animal room. Perhaps I'll show you guys what I got going on down in here next week. What I want to show you in this one is an update on the Fire-Bellied toad Paludarium. Before we get into the heart of this update, I want to do a little recap and show you all of the events that transpired to get the tank to where it is right now. The initial build video for this Paludarium was uploaded back in October of 2018. However, I set the tank up 2 months prior to that, so it's actually around 17 months old. The design was done in a 40-gallon breeder aquarium, which is a great footprint for this type of setup. There were a lot of steps involved in creating this, but it's pretty simple once you break it out into parts. I built up layers of foam for a background, made an egg crate false bottom, added the filter, made a foam structure and covered it in pond liner, sprayed down and carved expanding foam, covered various sections in cocoa fiber liner, put down silicone, cocoa fiber, and orchid bark, attached a few DIY vines, built up slate stone for the waterfall, added some substrate, hardscaped the land area with cork bark, added a few plants, put all of the materials in the water area, sprinkled botanicals throughout the entire setup, introduced the cleanup crew, and of course set the toads free in their new mini jungle. About a month later, a small group of white cloud mountain minnows and a rogue danio were added to the bunch. I guess it's also worth mentioning that this tank sits on a custom built rack. It consists of 3 40-gallon breeder tanks, all of which are paludariums for my various frogs. We'll do updates on the other two at a later time. In a nutshell, that's everything that was involved in constructing this setup. I'll link the build video in a card up above and down in the video description. You may also be curious about maintenance. I made a dedicated video about that a while ago and I'll link that up as well. However, I just did some maintenance the other day, so it's probably worth talking about. What I did first was trim down a lot of the plants. I did this to stimulate new growth and also let more light into the tank because they were really starting to block out the light. After that, I drained out about 20% of the old water. Of course, I had to replenish with some clean water, which was treated about a half hour prior with Fritz ACCR, my preferred water conditioner. This was provided by our channel sponsor, Fritz. Lastly, I replenished all of the botanicals. Alright, so that's enough of a recap. Let's take a look and see how the tank has matured to this point. The first thing that I'll mention is that this tank turned out awesome and exactly like how I had envisioned. You'll notice that it's dimly lit, and I think that's the perfect type of lighting for this setup. A lot of the times when people are setting up paludariums and aquariums, we're using these really bright lights, and in a way I think it makes it look unnatural because everything's evenly lit and you don't really see that out in nature. What I wanted to replicate was an area in a forest with a lot of dense plant growth near a water feature, and I think I definitely pulled it off in this one, and the lighting really helps add to that ambiance. Of course, all of the dense foliage and botanicals in the water feature really help add to that ambiance as well. Excluding a few, pretty much all of the plants I initially put in here are still in here and doing quite well and have really filled in the space. One of the questions I got most about this setup was how am I going to maintain the filter? And I mentioned it in previous videos, and if you go back to the original video and see how I constructed the tank, you can see how I would maintain it. It literally just pops out of the slot that it's in, and it's quite easy to maintain. That said, I haven't had to maintain it once, and that's probably because of how I'm running it. It's not meant for biological or mechanical filtration, it's only there to move the water. So that means the tank isn't mechanically filtered whatsoever, and all of the biological filtration is done through the substrate and other surface areas in the tank. You may be surprised to hear this, but like all of the other setups in the animal room, this is an extremely low maintenance setup. I mean very low maintenance. Like, I've only done 4 or 5 water changes on it since it's been set up, and those are small water changes. We're talking 10 or 20% at the most. There was one occasion early on in this tank's life where I did a quick gravel vac underneath of all of the botanicals, but as I've had this set up long term, I've just really found that it's not necessary. I think the beneficial bacteria colonies within this setup are just so robust that they're really taking care of any gunk that may build up. Whether that be breakdown of the botanicals over time or waste from the fish, I think nothing is being wasted here. We also have the phytoremediation of the plants working for us here, so honestly I think what I've created is just a really well knit ecosystem. I should also mention that there's a colony of snails in the water feature that are also working for us. With all of the breakdown of organics, there's absolutely no need to fertilize this setup, and as you can tell, the plants are growing quite well. So really, the only maintenance this tank requires, first and foremost, is the trimming of the plants, and that's mainly just to keep them from blocking out the light. Maybe 2 to 3 water changes a year, and then of course topping off the botanicals, which is probably the most prevalent thing I have to do. Whenever I first designed this setup, I had no intention on keeping fish with the toads. It was supposed to be a toad only setup. The thing is that these toads are mildly poisonous and they excrete a toxin from their skin. If you read online, most people are going to tell you not to keep fish with the toads because the toxins will kill them. As you can see, there's none of that going on in here. These are all of the fish that I initially stocked it with. I've seen the toads try to hunt the fish down, but just by looking at the numbers, if they had eaten any, I can't imagine it was very many. Again, I partially think that's due to how I have it set up. With all of the botanicals and leaf litter, the fish have so many places to hide, and I'm sure that they blend quite well that the toads don't even see them a lot of the time. However, these are some boisterous fish, so they're not doing much hiding. They go right up to the toads without thinking twice. As I said, there was some breeding going on with the white clouds, and the toads are doing the same exact thing. Unfortunately, it seems like it's a really hard thing to capture because anytime I try, the toads go and swim away. I've seen them in amplexus several times, and I always hear them in there barking. It's really a croak, but honestly it sounds like a little bark. I always hear them in there doing it, and it's a really funny thing. So it's pretty cool because the fish are breeding and the toads are breeding, so that means they enjoy this setup. That should cover just about everything that I could think to discuss about the tank at this current time. I'm not quite sure about the future of this setup. Part of me wants to redo it because initially I set it up just for the toads, so a lot of the design choices I made were centered around the toads, but knowing now that the fish can coexist with them without issue, there's definitely some changes that I would make. I think I could capitalize on a lot of the design elements better these days too. The waterfalls, for example, I think it'd be cool to do several of them, so maybe if there are 2 or 3 and a couple of pooling areas within the waterfalls, that would give the toads options. You know, if they want to hang out in some pooling areas up near the land in the waterfalls, they could do that, or they could go down in the main water feature with the fish. That said, if I go and redo this tank, it probably wouldn't be for several months because I am still enjoying it as it's set up now, and honestly, if I kept it going like this long term, it wouldn't bother me whatsoever. I just think that there's some elements I could do better, and honestly, it's a little bit of a problem because with each project I learn something new and I just get better and better. So every time I look at my old setups, I'm thinking, I could do that better, so it's just an ongoing cycle for me. Another change I think could be really beneficial for this setup is to move the filter to the outside of the tank to increase the volume of it, because although it's quite small, it does take up a little bit of space, and if we could really maximize the space in there, I think it could make things a little bit nicer. And that is going to do it for the 17-month update on the Fire-Bellied Toad Paludarium. I know many of you guys have been asking about this for quite some time, so I'm glad to have finally delivered it, but I'm just in a weird phase right now where I really can't be doing all these update videos. It's a lot easier actually for me to make projects, believe it or not. But as time rolls on, I definitely want to start doing more updates on this stuff and kind of document more about how I'm maintaining these things. I feel like a lot of you guys think it's a lot more complicated than it actually is, but I think this update should have illustrated how low maintenance pretty much all of these setups really are. Not doing much other than feeding the animals and occasionally trimming stuff, and of course with a setup like this I have to miss it, but that's a topic for another time. If you guys want to see future updates on all of this, progress, that sort of thing, also let me know what you think I should do with this. Should I redo it down the road? Should I keep it as is? I feel like most of you are going to tell me to keep it as is, but I tend to do what I want to do, so probably it's going to get redone at some point, but I'll definitely keep it like this for at least a couple more months because I really enjoy it. But actually probably what I would do is make a separate setup, move everything into that one, whatever. I'm getting off on a tangent, but I got a lot of stuff going on down here. Stay tuned for that, and until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.